Good morning and welcome to our 46th Coffee with the Commissioner event. It's a pleasure to be here this morning, and it's great to have some great guests that woke up early to join us. We do these coffees on a very frequent basis here in the District 1 office, and typically what we used to do is go out to Denny's or McDonald's or someplace out in the field and we talk about things that were on constituents' minds: code enforcement, land use, all these other things, the economy. But as we all know, COVID-19 has put a stop to just about everything that used to be normal in our lives. And so what we've done now is we've utilized technology to reach an even broader audience. And we've talked about all the different ways that COVID-19 is impacting our community. And we've talked about small businesses, tourism, economic development. And one of the things that's very important to me and that we haven't really talked about, or we haven't talked about at all, is the impacts that COVID-19 is having on our faith-based community and our churches in particular. So this morning, I'm delighted that we have Dr. Brian Nall with us from the Pensacola Bay Baptist Association. He's the executive director. I'm very proud to have him here. And we also have Pastor Gordon Godfrey Jr. from Marcus Point Baptist Church. Always a pleasure to see you guys. Pastor Godfrey, great to see you. And your church, you guys do a bunch of great stuff. Now it looks like we have, I've got another attendee that's joining. Let me just do this right quick. And we've got another special guest that's going to join us right now. Pastor Jim Locke is going to come aboard. This will be fun because we're on live, and we'll see if we can get him in here, and we'll see how this works. We haven't done this before, so we'll see how this works. But Pastor Locke, we don't see you yet, but hopefully you're working your way in. Let's see. See what I mean? Sometimes we have some technological challenges here, but let's see here. But meanwhile, while we work to get Pastor Locke on board, Janice Gilley is our county administrator, and there's never a shortage of issues. So what we like to do is start the program each week out with giving her the opportunity to give an update from the county. So Janice, take it away and tell us what's going on in the county.
Yeah, so as we are still preparing for our budget, as we are still looking at revenues and fees and things like that, we will be having our budget hearings on July 14th and July 15th. Outside agencies will be asked to participate on July 15th, so that's 3 weeks from now. And, it is a very difficult time to try and create a budget for a county whenever you are looking at potential losses, but also trying to plan for the future prospectively, because we all do hope that things will rebound and we will have the revenues that we anticipate. So that's been kind of a very interesting exercise to try and create a multi-$100-million budget from that perspective. The other thing I would mention is that it is sad and unfortunate that we do continue to have hospitalizations and deaths related to COVID. And so, our hearts continue to just be saddened for those families, and we do go out to them as they are currently experiencing those losses. And we just as a community don't want to forget that there are families still suffering in this way with this particular disease. We do like to encourage folks to please get tested. Ascension Sacred Heart has tests. They have the drive-through center. You have the Community Health Northwest. They have walk-up testing centers. Baptist Healthcare also has the opportunity for you to be screened and to get an online appointment. UWF is still doing their testing from 9 to 5 daily, where you can, come there unless there's inclement weather. And then you have the Florida Department of Health in Escambia, off of Fairfield. They are working with us in particular, as we have had, ECAT last week. We have had 81 of our employees at ECAT tested. And then we also have the One Blood in Escambia County is still testing blood donations for the antibody. And so I would just encourage folks, if you're concerned or if you have symptoms, to continue to work with testing or with your employers to make sure that you are protecting others, and then also your family. And I would say that we are still, like I said, anecdotally seeing that it is typically family relationships, or like we said, carpooling, those very close confined exposures are what tend to be the things that give you the most likelihood for contraction. Not so much passing somebody in the hallway, or maybe even being in the office next door if you're staying in your own office. We do have, like I said, we have had an increase in hospitalizations, but we still have plenty of ventilators that are available, and we do still have plenty of beds. Our capacity is almost still 1,000 beds in our community. So we are not at that tipping point in terms of concern for the medical community at this point.
Janice, let me ask you, I saw in the News Journal yesterday on the front page, they did a story about our latest snorkeling reef. Tell the people about that. I think that's a great story. I'm glad the News Journal put that on the front cover. It's great to have a positive story on the front instead of a constant negativity and stuff. Tell us about Charlie Gonzalez.
Yes, so Charlie Gonzalez was an absolutely wonderful county employee. If you could have had a county ambassador, an employee that was an ambassador, I would say it was Charlie. Everyone that he came in contact with, he had just this pleasant demeanor, and he always had this joy of life. And I love that people talked about his job was to give people an address, a place in our community. And so I think it's extremely fitting that the commission, named a reef after him. He absolutely loved to surf every day that he could, either before work or after work. And he, just shared that joy of the outdoors with as many people as he could. So unfortunately, he died suddenly one evening, and in order to honor him, we had a reef recently that was funded by Fish and Wildlife, and our Marine Resources was able to deploy that right off of the casino beach. It's about 700 feet off of the beach, and you're able to reach it, and go snorkeling out there. And so we're really excited about the habitat in terms of the fish and the other ecosystem that it's going to help create. And so folks are going to be able to get there, and it will kind of be a destination and it gives you something else to do. I love to go to the beach, but sometimes you can only jump in the waves so much.
Right.
So I think having another activity that you can enjoy will be great. We had a little bit of an issue last week. It was hard to deploy. They had to regroup the equipment, and then luckily they were able to deploy it after the third day. So.
Well, that's a great thing. And we have a number of those, and folks could go to our website, myescamedy.com, and learn about all the different places where we've deployed these artificial reefs. Some of them are very, very close to shore, so you don't have to be a world-class swimmer to enjoy some of the great things that we have to offer. But appreciate that update, Janice. Now, it looks as though Pastor Locke has joined us. Pastor Locke, can you hear us?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
We can hear you. We tried to put you on.
Technical difficulties this morning.
No. Hey, we were just talking before we started about we have a hard time getting through 1 week without some kind of a snafu. So appreciate you being here. Are you able to hook up your video? Was the video able to link?
Well, I'm on. I can see you guys. In fact, I've been able to see you all morning, and every time you would try to connect me, it would freeze up and disappear. So.
Oh, okay. Should I try again, or do you want to just go audio? Or
well, I'm afraid that if we start pushing buttons again, you're going to disappear on me again. But I can see each of you guys.
All right. Well, you'll just be the audio voice this morning. But I appreciate you being here this morning, Pastor Locke. And
my pleasure.
And we're gonna have a great conversation this morning. And gosh, what a powerful trio of gentlemen that are here this morning with us. I'm going to reintroduce everyone. Dr. Brian Nall is the executive director of the Pensacola Bay Baptist Association. He's with us this morning. Pastor Gordon Godfrey Jr., senior pastor of Marcus Point Baptist Church, is here. And then, of course, joining us by audio, Pastor Jim Locke, senior pastor of Hillcrest Baptist Church. And the focus we're talking about today is COVID-19 and how it's impacting the faith-based community. And so I want to jump right in and ask each of you to go around the room on this question. How has this virus, this pandemic, negatively affected you? And we'll start with you, Dr. Nall.
Yeah, appreciate the opportunity. The Pensacola Bay Baptist Association, we're 60 churches that have just chosen to cooperate together all across Escambia County. And so we help to coordinate that partnership. And so we're blessed to be able to see that. Hillcrest, Pastor Jim Locke, they're one of our churches. One of the biggest things that we have heard with negative impact, we are so glad that we had been deemed, the faith-based community, an essential service. So
Yes.
We're thankful for that. But there was still the translation and the early stages of this pandemic as to how do we practically apply the guidelines, because they weren't expressly spelled out, of
Right.
course, towards the faith-based. And of course, at the very beginning, all the numbers kept shifting when we go from the 250 down to the 50, down to the 10. And when that covers multiple size churches with different footprints, different complexities of ministries, how that is fleshed out, that's where it gets tricky. And so the scheduling was the initial hurdles. And then the next phase probably was the really fast trying to get up on technology, as different churches have different levels of technology to apply. But I would probably say most I hear from the pastors, I even was with another one even yesterday, was saying the same thing. The biggest has been the desire for ministry, or the level of ministry that they've had for many years. The desire's still there, but how they pull that off has been the struggle. Even just delivering food or getting clothing to the needy, wanting to deploy shower trailers to those who are in need. Vacation Bible School right now is really big. And so all of those types of logistics, those have been some of the biggest challenges that pastors from the north end to the south end all experienced. And they're still trying to figure out healthy, wise ministry. So that's a huge part as a ministry. And I'd probably say number two is the sense of community. They're glad that they've been able to deploy on online platforms, Zoom. Everybody's kind of become Zoom experts.
Yeah.
Many of our pastors who didn't have an online presence, seemed like overnight they all became televangelists. So we've talked with them about that. But still, even though they interacted with their churches online, heightened pastoral care with calling and writing, all, they were not able to be in the same room. And so many of our pastors experienced, we're with the people, but we're not able to be with our people. Right. And so that life on life, that creates some heartache. And even though they're slowly, the regathering, there's still some folks that really just want to give hugs. They want to be there to minister. And those have been some of the bigger negative impacts that our churches are still working through.
Thank you for that. Pastor Godfrey, Marcus Point's a big church. Been there many times. Love the energy, love the special events that you do to honor our service members and our law enforcement. How has that changed? How has Marcus Point Baptist Church been impacted by COVID-19?
Yeah, and that has been one of our biggest issues, is that we are event driven a lot of times for events in the city. You know, we're known for the sunrise service down at Wahoo Stadium. And we generally have about 5,000 people that show up down there. Well, we couldn't have anybody in the stadium, so we had to do the event just with our band and praise team and me preaching from the stage in an empty stadium, and then just put it online. So rather than having all those people connected together in one place, we had to go online. So that was a negative. We normally do this gigantic Easter egg hunt. You know, we call it Egg-a-Wahooza, and we partner with the Wahoos and do that.
Right.
Well, we generally have 10, 15,000 kids that show up for that. So we couldn't do it. So we had to go, rather than bring them to the stadium, we employed about 400 volunteers, and we took Easter eggs to homes all over the community.
Wow.
So it was a negative in that we couldn't be together, but it turned into a positive that we got to still minister into the community. So I'd say the biggest probably negative for our church is not being able to impact the community together, bringing people together.
Right.
But of course that forced the church to think, you know, how we can still meet the need. And so we've changed our way of doing. We've changed our method, but to be able to accomplish what we're trying to accomplish. But it's been difficult not being together. We started back on May 31st, coming back together, and now we're pretty much wide open in our church as far as our ministries go. We're still having to watch the social distancing and things, but we're now coming back together for our worship times.
Fantastic. Pastor Locke, appreciate you being here this morning. Obviously, I've been attending church at Hillcrest since I moved back to Pensacola in 2004. You're one of my heroes. And, you know, I listen to you preach, and I don't want to get mushy, but you've been a life-changing influence in my life, and I love Hillcrest Baptist Church. And I'm just concerned. One of the things I worry about is it's very comfortable to watch you preach from the living room while I'm drinking coffee. And so, how is Hillcrest recovering from COVID? And tell me about the negative impacts that this has had on our church.
Well, thank you very much, Jeff. And by the way, we have surely missed you and your wonderful wife.
We're still watching.
And I know, and that's the thing. Don't get too comfortable drinking that coffee at home on Sunday morning. And that's the thing, particularly here in summer, because, the one thing I think that we as pastors have concerns about in these kinds of things where people are separated from one another for an extended period of time is, getting out of the normal and customary routine of assembling themselves together. For people who have been associated with church for a long, long time, who've been enculturated in with and by the church, it's almost unimaginable for most of our people to conceive of church, particularly for the long haul, not being able to assemble themselves together, because we understand the community vitality that comes with church. And, we found that that's what most people miss. We were holding out a little bit longer than many other churches for the regathering together. We the last time we were together unabated was on March the 15th. And we held off a little bit longer than some in terms of having regatherings because we felt like in an extreme limited kind of way that most people wouldn't get what they really wanted out of church by coming back and having to be super separated and then herded back out of the building as quickly as possible.
Yeah.
So we waited a little bit longer in the hopes of being able to get more people together at one time. And like Gordon, we came back together on the last Sunday of May in a limited kind of fashion, and have been operating that way ever since. Our plan is to make another adjustment as of the first Sunday of July, where we start having our group meetings back on campus again on Sunday mornings, and preschool and children and students begin to do their normal and customary gatherings on Sundays and Wednesdays as well. Not quite back to normal. We still have some limitations with respect to social distancing and cordoning off pews and things of that nature for the foreseeable future. And we're still not having a choir yet. That probably will come later. But for the most part, we're up in the ante a little bit come July, and hopefully some things will be back to normal. I will say that to echo what Gordon and Brian both have said, we've missed a lot of the ministry dynamic in terms of being able to impact. Hillcrest is a church that is deeply involved in mission, and that's an area that's affected us both locally and regionally and internationally, because we take, up to a dozen mission related trips, some years even more a year. And we support over a dozen missionaries on the field around the world. And we spend a lot of time going to visit them and supporting them. Well, we've not been able to do any of that this year. And so that's been a significant impact. We are looking at doing a couple of late fall trips and visiting some of our partners and taking a small group of people later in the year, Lord willing. But those kinds of things are just not an option for us as a church, because America has become a bit of a pariah. And so if you go on an international field, you've got to quarantine in most European countries for 2 weeks, just the moment you get off the plane. And so it's just not possible.
Well, there's a lot of challenges. And one of the things that I look forward to, and I know that each of you gentlemen are engaged in Bible studies, independent of, the church service. And I've attended an ecumenical men's group at First Assembly of God since 2009. And we've got Catholics, Baptists, Protestants. We occasionally have people of Jewish persuasion that come in, and it's just an excellent thing. And that got totally shut down. And it's funny how when you get into a routine of going, seeing the people, like you guys talked about, the fellowship of being together with people, and then suddenly that's yanked out. How have you guys dealt with that, each of y'all, your individual churches? I'll start with you, Pastor Godfrey. The Bible study groups, the small groups, has everyone gone to Zoom? Is that what you're doing?
Yeah, we went to Zoom initially, and then just gradually started opening up Bible studies face to face. But we were able to maintain probably 3/4 of our Bible studies. We have about 82, 85 Bible study groups that meet every week. So we were able to keep most of those going through Zoom. But in the last 2 weeks, we've started bringing people back together, the smaller groups. And then if we have larger groups, we're trying to keep them separated, do the social distancing in the rooms. But people are starting to come back. And what I'm sensing now is people are going, come on,
Right.
we've had enough of this. We're ready to get going. And so they're pretty much beating down the Bible study doors now. They're wanting to get in and get going. So we've started doing that. As of last Sunday, we started doing that.
Wow. Pastor Locke, how about on Hillcrest campus? Are the small groups back together yet? Or
No, small groups will be coming back together physically at our church as of the first Sunday of July.
Okay.
So really, we only have one more Sunday where we're not meeting physically together as groups. And like Gordon, I think Hillcrest would echo that. Probably 3/4 of our adults, we have some of our adults are scared to death of things like Zoom, and they don't even want to touch it. And so, but they'll stay connected, and they'll phone call with one another, and maybe even voluntarily get together for some smaller type things. But we've had most of our groups connected either via Zoom or one of the other video platforms, and that has worked. That's worked well for us. Our student ministry, man, they've been pace setters in this area.
I bet.
They've stayed. The students in college at both of our campuses have done some of the most creative things I've seen in terms of staying vitally connected in all kinds of creative video platforms, and they're very excited as well about getting back together, and that will actually happen. Well, actually, I said first Sunday of July, and that's true for Sundays, but our midweek gatherings will resume on July 1st, which is a Wednesday. So July is a big transition month for us as well. But videos helped us out a lot and enabled us to stay together. We're thankful for the technology.
Dr. Nall, you deal with pastors. You said 60 different churches. How have you guys been staying in contact? Has this disrupted your operations and what you do in ministering to the ministers?
We've been able to pretty much stay continuous. We already had some platforms in place where I'm able to interact with all of our pastors at the same time. And so been doing that for a couple years now. When you have pastors and all dynamics and all over the county, and I'm also over Walton as well, Walton County. So to been able just to communicate to everybody at one time. So that's helped because when guidelines were coming down, we knew pastors needed to make relatively quick decisions, informed decisions. And so I just wanted to stay on top of executive orders and other guidelines, translate those into pastor guidance for them, church dynamics, whatever size church it might be. So we've been able to communicate via Zoom for a while, just because of the size of the county and to alleviate people off the roads for a couple of years. We've just even pushed for our meetings. Hey, this meeting's coming up. Hope you see you in the room or on Zoom. So we've been able to leverage that for a while. So this was wasn't too big of a hurdle to shift. We've just probably one of the more bigger. We were glad we were able to help churches who didn't have a YouTube page. We set them up a YouTube page or Facebook page or a website, or help them set up online giving. Just whatever those technological needs they had, we helped them kind of track along with that through this new hurdle.
Sure. And, talking about giving, I grew up Catholic, confirmed in the Catholic Church, grew up in a Catholic family, and that's what drove me away from religion for many, many years. And then I, of course, my brother and my wife and Pastor Locke, I got pulled back in, the greatest thing that ever happened to me in my life. I can't talk about it or else I'll get emotional. But when we see this COVID-19 and you combine that with an aging demographic of really faithful church attenders, and fewer young people and young families joining churches. And I want to throw this out there. It's a question, a serious question. How does our nation contend with this dynamic of this? Now we have this COVID-19. We've already got statistics that show that fewer people are going to church in a traditional way as they have. And all of this combined together, what is the future of Christianity in America? And I'll start with you, Pastor Godfrey. I know you have some feelings on that.
Well, absolutely. What we've experienced is, the people that are faithful, they're going to be faithful right on through. I mean, your older folks, it's like you said, been going to church all their life. They're connected, they're committed, they're givers, they're in. And it's a lot of those younger families that typically are, I hate to say it, but I'm sure Jim understands this. They're 2 out of 4, weeks out of the month anyway.
That's right.
And so, those 2 out of 4 people, they've just kind of gotten used to this staying away. And, but also what we're seeing is a comeback, an excitement of comeback. It's almost like some of these young families are saying, we've learned some things during this social distancing and during this away time, where now we realize the importance of having our family connected to church, to the gathering, to the assembly. And we are now, and it just seems to be happening in the last few weeks, we're seeing a shift where a lot of young couples are really wanting to get back in church. That's one of the reasons they were just insistent that we started opening the doors for their children.
Oh, man.
And they wanted their children in Bible study. They wanted to drop their kids off the nursery. I mean, it's just been, and it's just happened like the last 2 weeks. And I'm sure that Jim's going to see this exact same thing when they start opening up wide open. I'm seeing young families that are just really wanting answers. They see the negativity out there in the world and they want to know, hey, how do I deal with this? How do I protect my family from this? How do I teach my kids to deal with this? And so we're seeing young families really coming back with a vengeance. And I think it's going to open the door like never before to us ministering to young families.
What an optimism.
I see revival. Honestly, I see revival happening. And typically revival happens in the church when the church goes through the toughest times. When they are persecuted, when they go through tough times, that's typically when the church comes back and has revival. And I'm seeing that begin to happen. And I think we're going to see that in the future. I really do. And young people are going to be a part of that. Our college group now, it's like Jim said, our college group is growing like never before. This last 2 weeks, we've had the largest college group that we've had. So it just shows you that they're looking for some answers.
That's
We
fantastic.
got to the church has to be there to give it to them.
Yeah, that's great. Pastor Locke, do you see that same phenomenon over at Hillcrest as well?
We do. And I echo that optimism and believe it wholeheartedly. The ironic thing from a Hillcrest perspective for this is that even before and on our first Sunday back, all I did on our first Sunday back, the last Sunday of May, and I would imagine that Gordon had a similar experience. I just walked out on the stage and everybody erupted in extended ovation. I mean, not for me, just because finally we're together, and we're not a massive number yet, but we're together, and it was an electric room. And the thing about that, from our perspective, is that and part of this leads to some degree of disappointment for those of us that would have never imagined something like COVID-19. I mean, this is like something out of a Tom Clancy novel. None of us had ever imagined anything like this. This is the kind of thing you read about in thriller fiction. And so this is terrain that's unfamiliar, and none of us as pastors spoke the language. One of the things that was really helpful for me was having a weekly phone meeting for Panhandle pastors. It was sponsored by the Florida Baptist Convention, where we just got on a Zoom call like this, where my camera always worked, and I don't know why it's not today. But being able to talk to pastors weekly and hearing from them one after the other, what they're doing, what they're thinking. That was very, very helpful. We had started this year off in a stronger fashion than any year in the 15 years I've been pastor at Hillcrest. We baptized nearly 60 people in January and February alone. We've never baptized 60 people in the first 2 months of the year. And then all of a sudden this hits, and that incredible momentum was pretty much squashed. And that was the negative part. The positive part is that we've been able to use technology as much as we can, keep people together. And now, very similar to what Gordon has said, we sense an energy and an excitement, particularly as we begin to ratchet things up a bit in the month of July and provide additional opportunities for people to gather together in reasonably safe and healthy kinds of ways. So I'm optimistic and very hopeful that trends don't spike significantly, that cause us to have to back up and change. And I believe if that's the case, then we're very poised for a strong fall, for God to do something really great.
Well, speaking of the spike, as everyone knows who's been reading the paper, and this is impacted every facet of life, really. But we've tested 28,963 Escambia County citizens, and we have 1,244 positive cases. So the next question to you guys, and I put this to the restaurateurs and the economists that were on the show: if this goes into a second wave or spike or whatever you want to call it, whatever you'd like to, whatever it is, and we see hospitalizations go up and things have to be shut down, how will the churches respond? Will you stick with the electronic and the video and the Zoom, or will this be the end of some small churches? That's a question for Dr. Nall. Dr. Nall, I do worry about small churches. Obviously, the larger churches, Olive, Marcus Point, Hillcrest, it seems that they can weather the storms, but these mom and pop churches are very important. Can they weather a second spike? Will we see these churches go away forever?
I actually believe they'll be able to, most of them all, to be able to remain. Many of the smaller churches, the demographics of their age are older. And so for a couple of reasons, I fear they'll be able to stay. One is they have a very meaningful faith. It's not just a name only. It's not a nominal. They want to do everything and anything to be able to preserve, protect, and continue the practice of their faith. So, for instance, we have one of our churches in the extreme north end of the county. They're really not set up for Zoom. However, they leveraged freeconferencecall.com. So in the sense of staying in their own homes, they still gathered via phone together. They're not set up for online giving, but the people either drove by, dropped it off with the pastor in a safe environment, or they mailed it in. Wow. That continued, and the older demographic is not hindered by job layoffs. And so there's still the steady stream of financial income for them to continue. And I've even been told of a couple folks, different ones, they took their stimulus check and they said, "Pastor, use this to go buy food for people in the community."
Wow.
And so it's just they're paying it forward in their faith, and they want to do anything and everything for that. So by those means of seriousness, the tenure of their relationships, those are continuing. And plus, I say it's one of the beauties I love to see in just the churches work together, because I'm even right now working with a couple of churches. They said, "Brian, if you know of any church that might be struggling, you let me know." And so we've had churches make donations to other churches to support a pastor, to continue their ministries, food partnerships that are working together. So one church is getting in a big truckload of food. We're splitting it up into 3 other churches across the county. So it is the body of Christ coming together. So no church is really feeling we're all in this by ourselves. But rather, it's a body life from the north end and the south end all over, to share ideas, to share resources, to share struggles. And so for that type of partnership and body life between the churches, when there is a focused pain level, or there's a focused struggle, at times there can be a sense of turfism or competition that can exist between churches. But whenever crisis comes, focused crisis, those walls come down and partnership goes up.
That's awesome.
We've been really able to see that over the last few months is heightened partnership, heightened collaboration, cooperation, shared resources, ideas, technology. Churches saying, hey, you might not be able to record your service there on your campus. Technology. Come over to our church, Pastor. You can record it here. We'll upload it for you. Your people can watch it. And so that type of collaboration gives me great hope, regardless of the size church or where they're located at within the county. The challenges that do happen in our county for rural churches, one of the bigger issues that I routinely hear is in the northern half of Escambia County, really across Santa Rosa and Okaloosa and Walton, is it's not the desire to do technology, but the internet capability in the north of the county.
Yeah.
And so I've had pastors that they'll record it and they'll drive to the nearest place that they can tap into a Wi-Fi in order to upload a sermon so that people can get it. Streaming, Zoom, Facebook Live has been challenges because of the unreliability of internet in the north end. I've heard that countless times. But still, churches are collaborating to be able to overcome hurdles. We have a resource, you have a need, let's work together to meet it. And we're continuing to see that. So for that, I'm greatly encouraged.
That's great to hear. I love that. I love the fact that a big church would, I know that Hillcrest we've gone out and now we have Spanish Trail. And I know that Marcus Point, I've attended service out in Beulah at the Beulah Satellite Campus. What a great thing you do with Heroes Sunday and Heroes Day Out. And I know that Olive Baptist Church and Pastor Traylor has satellite campuses in Gulf Breeze and in Warrington. So do you think that's a dynamic, Dr. Nall, that you might see the big churches level of help ends up them taking over smaller churches? Would it go to that level, do you think?
Well, what takes place is anytime a church, let's just say, gets to a really crucible moment, there's a whole swath of options that churches can consider, because the biggest goal still remains is that how can we be a missional force to get the gospel into whatever the community is around there. And so what we do, I go into a particular church and help do a deep dive analysis, where they at, what's their background, financial, campus, all those types of things. And then as we see what the posture needs to move moving forward, it could be just a revitalization need. And so another church from the area might just come as a mentor or an encouragement to them. So that's one level through a revitalization path. And then other levels, depending on the individual situation, it might be a replant so that the church becomes a satellite campus, or a church might completely shut down and a healthy church sends a planting pastor and they rebirth a brand new church. It also could be a merger where two struggling churches, or maybe a struggling church and a unhealthy church near each other, they come together to form a brand new church. And so there is a blend between revitalization and replanting. And it creates a whole bunch of different options for churches to leverage so that the eternal or that long-term mission can continue just to dispense and the gospel and expand the kingdom, whatever necessary.
Wow. Well, Pastor Godfrey, I've been to your church a number of times. I love the things that you do for the community. Sportsman's Night Out. I've been very, very blessed to attend that on a number of occasions, and it's been very good for me. I've actually had campaign events there and things of this nature. But when you have a big church and you have a big facility, and it takes a lot of money to run these things, and without getting into too much of your business, it's got to be difficult when you go from a full Sunday, a full church to nothing. Have you been able to maintain the revenue that you need for your church? I'm going to ask the same question to Pastor Locke, because I'll tell you, I'm old school, old Catholic guy. I throw money into the basket when they come around. I'm not a guy that ever went online before. I'd never done that. I've learned, I've adapted. But so how is Marcus Point doing in that regard?
Well, this pandemic has helped us to use technology, and it's expanded our giving. We were blown away. When I talked to our staff in the beginning of this, we prepared for a 50% loss. And we thought, okay, we'll just learn to operate on 50% of our giving. And the first Sunday, it was pretty much that. and we saw it happen. But then once we were able to convert people to online giving and teach them, particularly some of your senior adults that are not used to that, like me, I'm having to adjust my thinking on all of this. And but once we were able to teach people how to give online and how to go on our church app and how to set up an account and do all of that, then our giving jumped. It has been incredible. Our online giving has just gone up, 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 up every single week. And we were doing our comparisons yesterday. And the month of June, we are way ahead of last year's giving at the same time.
Nah, I'm so happy.
I'm sure, and I'm in talking to pastors and, churches like Hillcrest that are, solid churches, that they're going to have the same thing. I know Jim's going to see the same thing, that your faithful givers, your senior adults that are used to giving, they're going to find a way to get their offering there. They have to drive to the church and, have someone stand outside with a basket out the door. They're going to get that dollar there. They're going to get it there. And your younger people, they're going to adjust and go online. So through it all, now we've actually expanded our giving.
Wow.
And when you're a missional church, when you're gospel focused, people realize that the gospel has to continue to go forth. We can't quit reaching people with the gospel. So that motivates people to find a way to give and to be a faithful giver.
That's incredible.
Really and truly, if you think about it, a faithful Christian, their giving is not tied to showing up on Sunday. It's really focused on the mission of who we are as Christians, which is reaching people with the gospel. So a Christian understands that they're going to find a way to get their money in. And that's what's happened. So thank God, praise the Lord, ours is still going strong.
Pastor Locke, over at Hillcrest, I know for my part, my small part of the whole equation, I've found your website and figured out how to do that online instead of dropping the envelope in the basket. How Hillcrest hanging in there in terms of the giving? And
that's been among the most surprising things that's resulted from this, because I think like it or not, pastors have to be concerned about the financial condition of their church. And I've told our people, and even people who are considering joining our church, that we're not afraid to talk about money. We're not afraid to talk. I don't know how to do ministry without money. And I'm pretty sure that neither does Gordon and neither does Brian Null. We haven't figured that out yet. It takes money to do mission, and it takes money to do ministry. And God has a plan for that with respect to how his people operate concerning their financial resources. And when all of this started, of course, we had gloom and doom scenarios. And I even encouraged our executive pastor to develop a nuclear scenario of how we would function and operate in the event of a 50% drop in giving.
wow.
And so, at least we had plans. And the first couple of weeks, we were down. In fact, the worst 2 weeks were the first 2 weeks. And then I don't know what happened. But here's the thing. We're not only ahead of where we were this time last year, we're actually ahead of our revenue giving for the year, which never happens at Hillcrest. We set pretty aggressive budgets. And so our philosophy typically is, if we're not running a little bit behind the budget by the midpoint of the year, we didn't set it with enough faith. And our biggest giving period's typically the last couple of months of the year. And so for us to be ahead of budget revenue as of the end of June never happens. I'd have to go back and see if it's ever happened in the last 15 years that I've been here. And yet we are. And so we've had the same experience as Marcus Point, and certainly ours is not unique. I've talked to a number of pastors that have just had almost a revival in giving, even in the midst of the pandemic, even in the midst of the unemployment that's taken place, which was a cause of a lot of our concern, because if your people aren't earning a reasonable income, then one of the first things to go in a family budget is discretionary giving, such as giving to their church. And yet people have proven themselves to be very, very faithful. And that's encouraging to me, particularly in these days of increased hostility toward the church.
Yes.
Lots of talk about churches potentially losing their 501c3 and what that would mean about tax deductibility of, well, when you have situations like this, that becomes something of a litmus test. And it causes me to be very optimistic that God's people are going to be faithful no matter what, which is what we should be.
Yes.
And so very, very thankful for how our people have stepped up and how they've responded to a very difficult time with continued faithfulness.
Well, I got to tell you guys, I had no idea how that answer would go. I didn't even know if you'd answer it. I mean, it's kind of a nosy question. I hate to get in people's business, but I just can't tell you how that just lifts me today. I'm so happy to hear that. I was afraid that we were going to hear some negative, because let's face it. I mean, when you've got 40 million Americans out of work, and I was at a meeting yesterday. We're sitting at between 11 and 12% unemployment here in Escambia County, Florida. That's a lot of people without a paycheck. And we all know the unemployment system is busted. It's broken. There's thousands of people still haven't got one penny, been out of work since March. So despite that, it's just so fantastic to hear that you guys, the big churches in our community are hanging in there and actually doing better. I want to make sure that everyone knows who we're speaking with again. This is Dr. Brian Nall. He is the executive director of the Pensacola Bay Baptist Association. We've got Pastor Gordon Godfrey Jr. He's the senior pastor of Marcus Point Baptist Church. And then we have Pastor Jim Locke, who is the senior pastor of Hillcrest Baptist Church. And of course, Janice Gilley is our county administrator. Hey, Janice, I wanted to, you've heard a little bit of this conversation. And I'm sure that, do you have a question for any of these gentlemen? I know we've kind of raised a lot of different issues. Is there any questions you'd like to ask of our panel?
No, actually, I've just been enjoying the conversation. I'm very fortunate to attend a small church that we never stopped meeting in person. We did modify our services so that we would have half the congregation at an earlier service and half the congregation at a later service. And we did a lot of social distancing, and you could sit with your families because like many of them, I can't imagine what it would be like not to have that opportunity on Sunday to have that fellowship. And so one of the things that I did continue to say as I've been questioned, the hardest thing for me was not being able to hug or touch or greet the fellow parishioners whenever we would come into service together. And I can't imagine what their congregations have been through. I think it's absolutely refreshing to hear this conversation.
Yes.
I think revival is exciting.
Yes, it is. It
You
is.
know, I'm also thankful that they've been able to maintain their revenues, because I do think that's always a concern that you have, in any organization. But I just think the faithfulness of their congregations is just, it's an amazing testimony. And I love the fact that Brian and his organization are there to help, small churches either in the North End or anywhere else that need help. I know that many of our churches have been the source of food for our community, because we know food insecurity is one of the things that you always want to make sure is taken care of in any disaster for a community. And I know that Gonzales Baptist, and I can mention others, but man, they had no idea how quickly they would run out of food. And so they did, have multiple, food opportunities. And so I just think it's amazing. And I appreciate, this conversation being held. And I also think that everyone should be thanked for what they're doing without, they're not asking to be thanked, but they know that when the community needs them, they're there and they're able to respond and help out. And I would also mention that just Hillcrest in general is always a great partner with us whenever we have any kind of emergency. The Baptist disaster team is just fantastic. And man, we just really appreciate them every time we have any kind of need. And
Janice, they've been mobilized once in the midst of the pandemic when we had that very strong storm that blew through here, not this recent tropical storm, but a few weeks ago when we had the 70-mile-an-hour straight line winds that came in, and a number of trees, particularly up here in our neck of the woods in the cantonment area. There was a lot of debris along Kingsfield and some of the neighborhoods there. And in the midst of the pandemic, right in the heart of it, probably the worst portion of it, that was one area where our church got to minister directly, and those guys didn't care. They took precautions where appropriate, but they were out in the community sawing down trees and clearing debris and helping folks who'd had home damage get back on their feet again. And so there have been some God stories and some terrific opportunities to minister even in the midst of the pandemic.
Absolutely. And we just appreciate that all of the disaster, the religious groups that come and help us out with disaster recovery. I mean, we do try and tell the story whenever we have disasters. Maybe we just don't tell it as well as we could, or maybe as strong as we should, because I can tell you right now, from my experience and from other administrators that I've spoken with, without the faith-based community and their assistance and response, we wouldn't have a response necessarily to the extent that we do. So we just appreciate that.
That is so true, Janice. And from giving food to the needy, to ministry to those to providing disaster assistance, to providing Sunday school, to all the things, vacation Bible study for students, student ministries. I mean, there are so many things that the faith-based community offers to this community, to the citizens of Escambia County, that it just confounds me, the level of angst and the level of anger that is sometimes directed toward the church. It's very, very discouraging to see it. And so, it's amazing how fast this has gone by. And I'm so thankful to each of these gentlemen, and also Janice as well, for being here. I want to end it with a question that's going to sound cynical, but I want to hear your guys' positive response, because maybe it'll help me. You hear from folks who are, somewhat negative toward religion, or they kind of push it away, and they just don't. They're just kind of almost antagonistic toward religion. And you try and talk about it, and one of the things that they will say is, if God is a God of love, why does He allow this suffering? Why does He allow COVID-19 to ravage these senior citizen facilities and kill people? So I'd like to know how each of you would answer it, because that's a cynical question. But there's a lot of people out there that think that way. If God is so great, then why does He allow this to happen? So I'll give you the first crack at it, Pastor Godfrey.
Well, it's really interesting you bring that up, because I got a phone call last night from a gentleman that's a police officer. And he was asking that very question. He said, I'm dealing with it every day. I'm seeing people that are just so angry. And he said, how do I deal with this? And where's this all going to end up? And I told him, I said, you just got to understand that God is in control. And none of this has caught God by surprise. He has a plan through it all, and He is going to be glorified. And for the sake of the gospel, this is going to turn into a good thing. God is using this to reach people with the gospel that would have never been reached before. They're asking questions and that they've not asked before. They're having to deal with life like they've not had to deal with it before. So they're looking for a place to turn. And so they're asking questions about God. Does God love me through all of this? Did God create this? Well, no, God didn't create this. I mean, there's sin in the world, and sin, as a result of sin, there's the curse of sin. And we're going to have these things happen in the world. But God is always God through it.
Great answer.
People can turn to God. And I'm seeing that really, really happen in our community. And I think we're going to see it more so as we get more opportunity to share the gospel through this thing.
I like it. Dr. Nall, how would you answer that question?
I'd say in this world, there's two types of evil. One is moral evil. The other is natural evil. We face both of them. God never promised for any of us to be safe. And so whenever evil comes, whether it's moral evil or like this virus, let's just say natural evil, what it's done, it would be a endlessly horrible thing if in the midst of that, He gave no hope. But the good thing, whether it's moral evil, God gives hope in the midst of those moments, Christ Jesus, to be able to resolve that. In this world, you will have trouble, but take hope, I've overcome the world. And even in the face of natural evil, when these things such as viruses come into our world, it pains us that we live with these fallen effects that come into our lives, into our bodies, into our systems, into our societies. But through it all, there's hope. And I know Pastor Godfrey just has the great visual outside their church has long been the lighthouse for many, many years. And I think of Pensacola with NAS in tumultuous times and those dark places. NAS Pensacola, there was the lighthouse that gave hope in the midst of the darkness. All throughout our county are lighthouses of hope, our churches. The people, regardless if they're at the facility or not, are lighthouses of hope. And so God uses candles in the midst of dark times. And so God uses all things for his good. He does not cause the evil, but he leverages it and redeems it for greater good than we can ever imagine. And so I think at the end of it all, when right now we have a whole bunch of questions still that for a long time, we're not going to get them figured out. But one day, when the last chapter's done, we'll look back and, oh yeah, that's why.
That was the reason. Wow.
That's why.
Pastor Locke, your take on that? I'm sure you get a lot of cynical people that say, why would he allow this to happen? So
Oh, sure. And I just amen these two wonderful men of God and simply say the world is broken. The universe is broken. The world is broken. Humanity's broken. Families are broken. Marriages are broken. We're all broken people, and sin is the culprit. Sin is the reason for that. The fact of the matter is none of us deserve to live. All of us deserve to be judged. And yet the fact that we are alive, the fact that we have so much to enjoy is a direct reflection of how gracious and loving and merciful God is when we should be judged and when we should be dead. We're alive and we have opportunity. And because of the gospel, we're reminded that God has been in the business now for centuries of drawing a broken humanity back and putting it to the right. And he's done it through Jesus Christ. So as Brian's, we are grateful that even in the midst of the mess, we can be hopeful because this world is not all that there is. There is a better day coming. And we can live in light of that better day because of what God has done for us in the gospel of Jesus Christ by sending his one and only Son to take the penalty for our brokenness, that by simple faith, by turning to him and receiving not so much what you do to get to God, it's who you know, and by simply embracing the work of God in Jesus Christ, all that's wrong with our life and all that's wrong eventually with the world can and will be put back to the right for all of eternity. And that's what keeps us going in these important days, because we have the message. Thank God for it. And thank God for his calling to be those incredible lighthouses in a very dark and broken world. But the best is yet to come. And for those of us who know Jesus, we win, and we're thankful for it.
Wow, what a powerful. Well, what a great way to wrap up this conversation. I just can't thank you gentlemen enough for getting up early to join me. I think this is an important conversation to have. There will be some people that beat me up. They'll say, well, you shouldn't mix politics with religion. Listen, I believe in the free exercise clause, right? There's two parts.
Amen.
Free
That's
exercise.
right.
So, and we free exercise this morning.
That's right.
And I love it. So I want to thank
you,
each of you,
Jeff.
Dr. Brian Nall, Pastor Godfrey, Pastor Locke, and of course, Janice Gilly. Thank you so much for being here. Next week, we're going to try and bring in one of the CEOs of the local hospitals. You know, we've got the COVID spike going on again. I'm working to get Dr. Lanza back aboard so we can get another update. And folks are concerned. I'm concerned. We're watching this thing very carefully. But Janice, just before we wrap up, the hospitals, we're good on, we're not maxed out on capacity. We're not maxed out on ventilators. So we're not overrun, correct?
No, correct. As of yesterday, our numbers we had 207 ventilators. The total of ventilators, we had 162 available. And we also had, over 400 beds available as well. So while we did have 5 more hospitalizations, we still have a lot of capacity.
Fantastic.
awesome.
We will keep watching it all, and we appreciate you, all of you being here this morning, and of course the guests live. And thank you so much for sharing your stories and your insights. Greatly appreciated. And I hope everyone has a great rest of the week. Thank you. And we'll talk to you.
Thanks to everybody. God bless
Thank
you.
you.
God bless you.
Thank you, Jeff.